What's up, Scrub fam? Pat here, back from Orlando. Got my invite, which is pretty good. But we're not here to talk about today. We're going to talk about Draft Box 4 Dragon Brawl, specifically the blue cards. If you guys missed the red video, I will leave the link down in the description below for you guys. We're going to talk about how the cards stack up for the limited format to best prepare you guys for not only limited tournaments at your locals, but potentially any side events or any premier events that may feature Dragon Brawl as a format. So I'm going to pop up the grading scale here for you guys. I grade cards on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute best, nearly unbeatable, 1 being unplayable in every scenario, and 5 being a playable. 7 is usually the grade that I'm trying to look for when I'm trying to slot cards into a deck and make it the most competitive I can possibly be. I'll leave the specifics up there for you guys to read if you guys have never read it before. Before I jump into the actual cards, I want to make 2 announcements. Obviously, number 1, I want to thank Alec Bastron and Bearded Collectibles. He is our wonderful sponsor here at 3XG Productions and Shenron's Lair. Really appreciate everything Alec does for us. If you're looking to get your sealed product for anything you see in this video off of Draft Box 4, consider hitting up beardedcollectibles.com. They're going to have the best prices for you guys and help you get those cards you need. Also, this wonderful, beautiful lady on your screen here, Android 21, seems to be in set 8. So if you're looking for set 8 sealed product, which will be coming up, I believe, in November, also consider Bearded Collectibles and picking up your sealed product from them. Alright, so one last thing before we get into it, I want to give a special thank you to patron Nico Cruz, who gave me a pretty cool idea over the weekend while I was in Orlando. He basically was suggesting that we have kind of like casual hangout nights in voice chat in the 3XG Discord. If it's something you as patrons would like to see, where we just kind of shoot the breeze, talk about whatever you guys want. Doesn't even have to necessarily be Dragon Ball, but just kind of like get more FaceTime and hang out with you guys who are members of our Discord. Let us know in the comments below. We will try and get that set up for you guys. We're all about giving back to you guys here at 3XG. So anything we can do to make things more enjoyable and a better experience for you and help you guys out, it means a ton. So let us jump into the actual cards and waste no more time. So first up, we have Ultra Instinct Son Goku the Unstoppable. 4 cost, 20k is a great rate. This card, as Matt's been calling it, is basically Cryptic Command. Cryptic Command, I think, is a bit of a stretch for you guys who don't know in Magic. Cryptic Command is a format-defining counterspell that not only counters a card, it can bounce something and draw a card, as well as basically make it so your opponent can't attack with anything on their turn. This card basically does 3 of the 4 things. It doesn't stop your opponent from attacking with everything. I think that'd be a little bit ridiculous, as much as I really would like it. But that said, Goku is still really good. He's relevant at all points in the game, past turn 4. I normally don't advise leaving 4 energy open, but considering how loose the timing is on Goku, you can basically use him in almost every situation and get pretty good value out of him. And he's a decent sized body for his cost as well, which makes me like him a lot. That's why I'm going to give him an 8. Not the most game winning card, but it's just super flexible and it's going to save your butt a lot. Next up is Super Saiyan Son Goku the Ever Adapting. 5 cost, 25k. With critical and barrier, doesn't seem the most exciting top end finisher, but critical is the best keyword in the format, and barrier means it dodges pretty much all the removal that your opponent's going to have. 25 is a sizable body as well, and since there's no super combos, this guy is going to basically tax your opponent's hand pretty hard. The evolve effect to get 2 and untap 1 is also super relevant because there's a crap ton of blue Gokus in this set, especially at the reprint level. So I think this is an excellent top-end finisher for blue. It doesn't just blow your opponent out of the water, but it definitely does its job and it will end the game quite quickly. So I'm going to give Goku an 8. Honestly, this card might actually even be closer to a 9, just like a soft 9, just because 25 critical really takes a toll on your opponent quite a lot. Next up is Son Gohan. 3-drop 15k is an okay rate, not the most exciting. However, it does get back a 3 cost or more from your drop that's blue. And considering the best commons in the set are 3-drop 30k blue cards, if you're in blue, it means you can recycle most of your heavy hitters. And then it also gets back your rares and your super rares, which are your game enders if you combo them early or they get discarded somehow. So yeah, he has a lot of value and he picks up more value as the game goes on. So really like Gohan. I'm going to give him a 7, very similar to how I gave Kale in set 7. This card is actually better than Kale because Kale, while she does get better like Gohan as the game goes longer, my apologies, she is a or he is a 3-drop 15k, whereas Kale, I believe, is a 1-drop 4k. So yeah, he's actually a relevant body too, so that's really, really good for him. Next up is Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta. Normally I give blockers a very high rating because they protect your life, but a 4-cost blocker is not as exciting, and there are so many good cards in this set that I feel like the bar for what makes an 8 now is different than what it's been in the past. You know, I know my criteria is like still roughly the same. There's just, I think, better cards that edge out Vegeta, so that's why I'm going to give him a 7. Still really good because he is a blocker and he does replace himself, but there are other cards in the set that will protect your life, I feel like, better at the same or less rarity. Krillin, Universe 7 United, 4-drop for 20k is an okay rate. And this card is removal, which is really good because there's very few cards that actually remove cards from the board at the common level in the set. There's not too many common or removal cards. Most of them are in the super rare or rare category. So this is removal in a pinch, which is, you know, pretty good. The downside is that it, you know, makes it so your opponent is going to start playing more threats or stronger threats earlier because it places it in their energy. So that is kind of like a double-edged sword, and I'm not super sold on it being, you know, the best card you can be playing when it comes to either removal or, you know, at the 4-drop level. But it is still a solid playable card, so I'm going to give Krillin a 6. I feel like there's just better things you could be playing, but definitely a solid card overall. Next up is Tien Shinhan. This card is just a worse version of Goku the Sweeper from last set, which was fantastic. The problem is that Tien is like got barely playable rates on stats, and while Burst doesn't really, you know, hurt it because you can't deck out, unless you have like a ton of those Gohans, it's not really going to help you either. It is basically the same card, only you don't get to draw a card from life, which was super clutch on Goku, and Goku actually was the bigger body at 15k. So I'm not super excited about Tien. I'm feeling like he's either a strong 5 or a light 6. He's again removal, which is pretty good. There are some removal cards that you know, some colors like red in particular doesn't really have any way to get things off the board outside of the super rare level. So that is pretty good for blue, but I mean, you are just bouncing it. You aren't replacing the card, and you have an attacker that's usually too small to really make an impact. So yeah, again, I would look to put Tien as maybe somewhere like either between the 35th and 40th playable card in my deck. He's kind of the tail end. This is where I'm really like searching for playables, and I don't really have many other options. Master Roshi, it's a hard negate. Unlike After Image in the last video, which was not a hard negate, Master Roshi is a hard negate, and hard negates are clutch because they save your life, especially in a format where there are no super combos. So I'm going to give Master Roshi an 8. Android 17, 2-drop 15k criticals dominated World Martial Arts Tournament limited format, and for good reason. Critical is the strongest keyword. 2 cost for 15k is a great rate, and you also get an amazing keyword. Sign me up. I think that you should be playing as many Android 17s as you get your hands on. Outside of the 3-drop 30k commons, 2-drop 15k crits are pretty much the next best premium card that you should be going. A deck that curves into Android 17 into a 3-drop 30k is in a very good position to win the game. Android 18 is 2-drop 15k, pretty good rate, just like we had with Android 17. She doesn't have critical, but what she does have is a pretty interesting energy sync ability where if you don't have a better play on your turn, or you are just trying to keep energy open anyway to protect yourself, say with either like a Master Roshi negate or things like that, and you just have 2 energy left over, you can just pay 2 and start grinding out your opponent and gaining card advantage. I think Android 18 is a lot better than she looks in limited, just because it does, and when both players are in top deck situation, she really is the difference maker most of the time, and that is worth quite a lot. So I'm going to give her a 7. Majin Buu, 3-drop 30k, boom. High 8. It's literally the best common that you can draft. You should pretty much never be passing any of these cards for any reason unless you open a bomb rare or super rare. In most cases, this is better than some of the super rares. No kidding. Frieza, Universe 7 United. Alright, so this card doesn't look like much. 3-drop 20k is a good rate. But he has blocker, which is pretty sweet. And he has barrier, which means he dodges all the removal. But the real kicker is having activate main for blue 2, play this card from your drop air. I don't think it can be understated that if you just get to 3 energy every turn, just get a blocker. And then you can just soak whatever your opponent's best threat is. and it lets you really play this really interesting board control game where you can kind of grind your opponent out. Like if you have a card like Android 18 and Frieza in your drop, you can just, instead of playing new threats, use what already is on board to clear your opponent's board and just grind them out with your energy sink abilities, and that will translate to game wins. It might seem like it'll take a while and it's not as like, it's not a windmill slam like some of the other stuff, but I think having a reusable blocker is really, really, really good, and it will save your butt more often than not and win you more games in the long run than many of the cards in this set. So for that reason, I'm going to give Frieza a 9. Not unstoppable, but you have to understand the value in a repeatable, playable negate that can also possibly deal damage. Speaking of repeatable negate that can deal damage, Whis, Keeper of Universe 7. So 7 drop, 25k double strike, and barrier. Good keywords, high cost, not something I'm a fan of. If that was all there was to the story, he would be getting a 6, much like his sister Vados. That said, Whis is a true build-around card, like a card where you really have to be conscious of what you're drafting. This is playing Whis and doing well with him really is the mark of somebody who's really good at drafting. This is a really skill-intensive build-around card. So what you're going to want to do to activate his permanent is you need 2 or more multicolor cards in your energy. All of those cards are at the rare level. If you open Whis, pack 1, pick 1, you can take him and then proceed to, regardless of your color in the deck, try to draft as many multicolor cards as possible and just use them as 1-cost 10Ks most of the time, and use them as energy either on turn 1 or turn 3 or 4 to try to set up the turn 5 Whis. Once Whis is in play, 25k barrier double strike does quite a lot of damage, and it has the free negate, which is pretty backbreaking and very difficult for many players to actually deal with. Some people just can't even actually beat it. So for that reason, if you actually implement the strategy, I would consider Whis to be basically a 10. He's pretty much unbeatable, I feel like, once you're ahead and he's set up, but it requires quite a lot to get to that point, and it requires things to really go your way. He's a true variable card. He is nigh unbeatable once he's actually on board on turn 5, but getting to that point takes quite a lot. So yeah, I definitely encourage you guys, if there ever is a competitive format for Dragon Brawl, to definitely try to draft this as an exercise. Like, try to draft that kind of deck to really get comfortable with what it truly means to have a build around strategy. Next up is Grand Kai, Lazy Instructor. 2 cost, 15k is great. What really makes Grand Kai pretty good is his activate main. So he costs 5 as an energy sink. And you basically get to get rid of anything your opponent has, no restrictions. So usually you see removal at the highest rarities, like super rare and stuff. I mean, this card is a rare, but it's still really good just because if you and your opponent are at parity or you are slightly ahead, you would be okay spending your whole turn after this card's, after you swing with it. You'd be okay with just spending all of your energy on a turn to set your opponent that far behind if they have some card that's truly bomb on board. So that it makes Kai really, really good in a lot of situations, just not absolutely backbreaking. I'm going to give him a 7 because I think that if you open him, there's not really a reason to not play him. He just has a lot of upside. It's just he's definitely not a come from behind card. Like, he's not going to impact the board in any crazy way like you would expect with some other cards. This is a card you play on turn 2. And then 5 or 6, if the game is just somehow stalled out, he's going to get you there. North Kai, Protector of Earth, 1 cost for a 4k. When you play it, you draw a card, and then has Activate Main, pay 2. Place this card so it's drop. Choose 1 blue Son Goku card with energy cost of 3 or less and 15k power or less in your drop area and play it. So this is pretty much applicable to some of the reprints. There are a lot of reprints, I believe, including Kainsei and Son Goku, that will let you search for other Gokus in your deck. It feels like it's more designed for constructed, more so than this, because there's obviously way more targets there. But overall, 1 drop that draws you a card is a playable rate at 5, and it does have the upside, like I said, of being able to get you another Goku. At least even late in the game, it can get you that Kainsei and Goku that will let you dig to find your super rare Goku. So that in itself is pretty good. So I'm going to give King Kai a 6. I think he has enough flexibility, and there are just, like I said, a crap ton of blue Gokus, where he'll get value out of it, and he's an energy sink as well. Bubbles. These are usually playable. One costs 10k, but in this, considering the quality of the cards and how high they are in this set, I am inclined to give Bubbles a 4. I really don't think this makes the cut most of the time, simply for that reason. Shu, Deluge of Power is a two cost 10k. If your battle card in battle is blue, you can, when you combo with this card, it gets plus 5k combo power for the duration of the turn. So these, we don't have super combos, but this cycle is basically supposed to replace it. I feel like most decks are going to be 2-color when drafted and 3 in seal, which makes using this card really difficult to play. And it is a 2 cost 10k, which is like an okay rate. Like I just said with the previous one, which I believe was Trunks, I'm going to give it a 6. It's not a true replacement for a super combo. It is pretty good just because it is a 0-10k, but only on a battle card, only specific battle cards. It's not as flexible, and it doesn't really protect your life. So, the Graceful Tactician is a 2-drop 10k. It's playable. When you combo this card, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 1 and place it on the bottom of its owner stack. So this card, being a 1 cost 5k feels pretty bad just because there's not really that many problematic 1-drops, and the ones that are problematic have barriers, so I just don't really see a reason to want to use this card. I understand that it's meant to be like a sideboard card for specific strategies, so for that reason I'll give it a 4, which is usually where a 4 ends up being something you'd side in, or a card that's just slightly below the radar, or like below playable. I'm sure there are uses for and as I play the format more, I'll kind of understand what those are. But this is a card I don't think I would ever be excited to pick or mainboard, until the very end of the draft. Next up, we have Janimba, Infernal Intruder, 5-drop 20k critical is a great keyword, and then it has activate main, pay a single energy. If you have 3 or more energy and no battle cards in play, you can play this card from your hand. And then pay 2, place this card at the bottom of its owner's deck. Choose 1 Evil Incarnate card in your hand with energy cost of 5 and play it. So obviously that second effect is meant more for constructed, unless you just are an absolute madman and open 2 of these. But yeah, really good card, but at the same time, like, really not good card. So Janimba gets the most value out of using his first activated ability, which is pay 1 to get a 20k crit, which is nuts when you think about it, but it only really does that if you don't have anything on board. And I feel like if you're getting to turn 3 with nothing on board, you're already really behind. And I just feel like the Majin Buu, the 3-drop 30ks, I feel like they're just better plays most of the time on turn 3 if you had the energy rather than just play this. I mean, obviously the best case scenario is to play this for 1 and then play a 2-drop on 2. You basically skip your 1s and your 2s and kind of take some punishment early to kind of ramp up to a good board state. In that case, that's pretty good. I'm leaning more towards like a 7 on this Janimba, just because I feel like you have to fundamentally change your playstyle so much to get this card to really get max value out of it. That said, critical is still stupid strong, so like it's either a really strong 7 or a really light 8 on this guy, just because for how rare he is and for like how things need to go, it's not, like I said, it's not exactly the best. Critical is so strong. 20k stat line with critical is ridiculous, honestly, but at the same time, I feel like to really get max value out of him, you're already behind. So that's my justification basically for the rating. So now we get to the extra cards. Kamehameha is a 1 cost activate main. Choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with energy cost of 3 less and place on the bottom of its owner's stack. This card's great. Great removal. It answers quite a lot of problematic cards. Most threats in this format are commons and uncommons, which are 3 drops and less. There are very few cards at the common or uncommon level that are 4 or higher, so this will target most of the problematic things that you can't deal with, and paying 1 to get rid of it, and it's gone basically for good until like turn 6 or so, is pretty great. So for that reason, I'm going to give Kamehameha an 8. I probably would only play 1 or 2 of these. Don't go super overboard on this card. Next up is Desperate Measures, 1 cost counterplay. If the battle card your opponent is playing has an energy cost of 2 or less, it is returned to its owner's hand instead of being played. Then choose it to one of your blue cards with an energy cost of 3 or less and return it to its owner's hand. So this is a really weird card where if you are already ahead on board, so you have two guys to your opponent's one, and they're down dropping to a 2-drop 15k, this card can be pretty clutch, honestly. So it also lets you recycle 1-drop. So this card is kind of like a really techie card. And I'm not really like sure until I play with the format how many interactions there are for it, but it at first glance it seems quite good. Simply because, again, most of the cards that you'll see that we talked about, such as, Shu, Bubbles, Grand Kai, Android 18, Android 17, Tien, like these cards are all going to trigger this card, and that's just in blue alone. And red has many, many more that will trigger this card. Most relevant attackers in this format are 2 cost or 3 cost. So you have a pretty good chance when your opponent plays something that will actually trigger this, unless you get value out of put and play effects such as North Kai and other cards like that. So for that reason, I'm going to give this card a 7. I think that it could go much worse or much better once we actually like sit down and actually play with the cards. My initial impression of the card though is that it is a 7, and I think just because of the ability to not only deny a summon for 1, but also you get to have some repeatable, abusable interactions and put and play effects. So now we're going to zip up here and change the change it to unspecified. We have to give me 1 second. We have to change it over to the blue reprints. So here we go. So they are in order, I believe, from set 1 all the way up to 7, and then all the supplemental cards on the side. So first up is God Break Son Goku. 7 cost is quite a lot. Has double strike 30k, and your opponent can activate counter or blocker against him, which is pretty good. It's pretty niche, but again, 7 is quite a lot in this format. I'm probably leaning on somewhere like either a strong 6 or a light 7. I think it is a finisher worth playing, but just because it has the evolve for 6, so it can come down and kind of close out the game, and it does get around some of the higher rarity cards, which are blockers and negates. So there is value in there. It's not super flashy and doesn't win you the game. Hopefully, it says its rarity is super rare. I'm hoping that there's like kind of like a rarity above rare but below the actual new super rares in the set, but we'll see when we get our hands on. Kind Saiyan Son Goku, 1-drop 5k that draws as a card, is usually pretty playable for the most part. This one digs 7 deep though to find us quite a lot of cards. There are so many blue Gokus and so many good blue Gokus in the set. I'm going to give him a higher than usual, a grade of a 7. Really, really strong turn 1 play for any blue deck just because of how many Gokus there are. Whis, the Resting Attendant. This card is obviously really good right now in Constructed. It hasn't seen play for a while, kind of disappeared. People forgot about it, and then it came back in all of the new Shenron ramp strategies. This card is decent in this format just because it does get you to turn 6 if you play it on turn 4. A little bit faster, and it is a 1-cost 10k, which there is a shortage of in this this box set if you guys haven't realized by now. But 4-drop 10k is just terrible rate. It's really not, anything special, but again, it does get you there a little bit faster and lets you play, cards like your 7-drop Vados and your 7-drop Whis, which is always helpful. And that for that reason, I'm going to give it a 7. I think there are better 4-drops, but there is still again something to be said about playing this guy just to get you to a bomb next turn if you're already at parity with your opponent or ahead. Determined Striker SSB Son Goku is the next card. 4 cost for 20k is an alright rate. Has 1 cost 10k combo, which is actually pretty good here. But paying 4 for a negate, oh man, what are you doing? That feels just terrible. Just absolutely terrible. The thing is, the Goku, the UI Goku, is a negate for 4, but it also is a removal and it replaces itself. This is a really poor choice of a reprint, I feel like. And it's a card I really don't think I would want to do. Even with the permanent effect to discard 2 Saiyans to drastically reduce the cost, -3 from hand to negate an attack is not something I'm super excited about, especially when draw power and hand sizes are so low in these kinds of formats. So for that reason, I would give him a 4. I think that if you're really strapped for defense and you really need it, he'll get you there, but then you can side him in, but I don't think I would advocate playing this card. I've tried playing it enough in Constructed, and it's never pays off. The card is a lot worse than it reads. Mighty Attack Son Goku. So this is a 3-cost 15k critical. So this is basically a worse version of Android 17, and I'm going to rate it as such. It is the same rarity, but one costs more. Same card, same rarity, just costs one more. So we'll knock it down to a 7. Criticals really should not be underestimated, even if you are basically paying a premium for it. You're paying 1 extra for it. Group Leader Peel-Off, 1 cost for a counter battle card attack. Obviously, you guys can know you can remove keyword skills from cards. It's actually pretty good in this format, but not like super great. I rate it very similar to how I rated like Krillin and Tien, in that it's a 6. It's a pretty cool tech option that you can play to kind of get rid of critical. So it's worth mainboarding one of these just because it can save your behind from like either a double strike or a triple strike when your opponent's not expecting it. But other than that, that's basically all she wrote with the peel off. There's not really anything else you can do with it that's like super special. Next up is Furious Rush Super Saiyan 3 Son Goku. This is another blue reprint for obviously the Kind Saiyan defined, but this one also not super great. Better reprint choice than the Negate, but not by much. I think it is. It gets hit by most of the removal. 5 cost for 20k is kind of a bad rate. And then it does replace itself, and it does have dual attack, but like, think about it this way: the 3-cost Kaba that got the dual attack, it was great because you're paying basically 3 for 2 20k swings. This is paying 5 for 2 20k swings, and you draw a card. Like, you're basically paying 2 energy upside to get this, and it doesn't have any way to evolve, which is a big bummer. It is a searchable target though for Kind Saiyan, so I'm going to give it a 5. It's definitely something I would consider having. At least one of, just to maximize my card count. It is also a 1-cost 10k combo, which is pretty sweet. I think the best use for this card is you aren't really actually looking forward to casting this. You're more looking forward to just playing this card because it is a Kind Saiyan target. Next up is Sneak Attack Son Goku. This card is actually pretty good. 3 cost for a 15k is an alright rate, and it does choose one of your opponent's battle cards and returns it to their hand. Yes, they'll play it again next turn, but it means that you are basically setting them back another turn. It can also pick off problematic blockers that don't have barrier, which will let you push for game, and that is worth quite a lot to me. So for that reason, I'm going to give this as a 7. Oh boy, At All Costs Vegeta. This card is a bomb in limited. You guys already know how good this card is constructed. I've talked about this card at great length in the Colossal Warfare draft reviews. This card gets a 9. It's nuts. It's not unbeatable, but it's nuts. You drop this guy on turn 5. If you could have 2 life to snap, you're probably just winning the game right there. He's too difficult to get rid of. He draws you 3 cards. He kills your opponent's best guy. He's absolutely massive and will end the game. Super Saiyan Son Goku is a 2-drop 20k vanilla. Great rate. But again, like we talked about in the other video, I'm going to down drop it. Normally I give these guys like an 8. But again, the quality is so high in the set that I feel like I want to drop this down a little bit lower. I think the 2-drop Android 17 is a better card for the cost, and if you could have either 17 or this card, I'd rather have 17, which is why I'm going to dock the points a little bit on this guy, even though it's like a really strong 7. Like, it's a really strong 7. Like, this is probably the second best 2-drop you can play. Deadly Defender Vegeta, 3 cost for a 20k barrier, is pretty alright, and then obviously your opponent has to attack this instead of going face if possible. I've never been a super big fan of these cards. They don't really help you a ton because odds are if you were spending cards to save this card, you could have just spent them to save your life anyway. That said, it's still playable. 3-drop 20k is a fair rate, and it does have barrier, which means it dodges a lot of removal and a lot of the counterplay cards that are here. So for that reason, I'll probably give him a 6. It's a solid card. Not anything too special though. South Kai Keeping Watch, 2 cost for a 15k is pretty good. It has blocker as well, which is also a big plus in my book. Pretty good for a common. I definitely would be excited to pick up a couple of these. 2 of these in a blue deck seems pretty good to me. Dimension Magic. Oh boy, I don't have to explain this. This is probably the best like blue negate ever printed. It's like not close. Vegeta Penitent Martyr is a board wipe, and that is something to be said. The problem is you can't really swing with this card, right? So you're gonna pay 3 for it, And if you swing with it and your opponent has something that can pick it off somehow, I'm not necessarily saying, I don't think, actually remember if there is anything here in the format, but it is super susceptible because this card only works if it survives till the end of your turn. So it can get picked off, which means it's not the best board clear you can possibly have. And also your opponent is just getting all those cards back to their hand, which means that they kind of are going to bury you in hand advantage and you'll be down one card. That said, in a pinch, this is really, really good at getting you back into the game. I've won games off of this card, but I've also seen my fair share of games lost by this card. So I'm going to give Vegeta a 7. I think it's a pretty good effect for the most part, and it's something you will want to have, but it's not as ridiculous as I originally once thought it was. Quick Shift Majin Buu. Like I said before when I rated these cards are 1-cost 10Ks, which are premium in this format, which is pretty good, but I don't really know how good these actually are in limited. You could cycle 2 dead cards to get 2 random cards, which is pretty cool, but you are negging a card for it. So I think I would play one of these and try it out, and it would probably be alright. But again, I reserve judgment on these. These are really like preference of player and things like that. Like, it's not something I'm excited about, but it's actually at the same time not a terrible card. So, and then lastly we have Focus Mind Piccolo is the last card. 3-drop blocker with barrier, and it gets to be a 20k blocker. This is what I was saying when I talked about Vegeta, why I think that there are just better cards such as Frieza and Piccolo than this card. That's why I kind of docked him a little bit. I think that paying 3 for a 20k blocker is a very, very good rate, especially since it dodges all forms of removal. And it is a relevant attacker as well in the late game. So for that reason, I'm going to give Piccolo an 8. I think he's a really, really solid pickup for every blue deck. And there you have it. That is the blue cards. Next time we will be talking about the green cards, so make sure you guys check in there as well. Again, if you really enjoyed this video, consider leaving it a like, a comment, and subscribe for those of you guys who are not already. Alright, okay, bye-bye-bye-bye.